Sorry, I think I had some problem with my mic. Let's wait for the rest of us to join. I could see Rohi is joining in. Let's wait for 2 minutes. And
Hello.
hi, Rohi. Give me 2 minutes, Rohi. Very sorry for this. There was a meeting ongoing, so I could not run the previous
No issues.
notebook. So I'm just running them now, and then maybe I'll share my screen. So yeah, so let me share my screen now. Yeah, I think this was the one. Yes. Hope you can see it.
Yes.
Yeah. Let the cells run, and maybe in the meanwhile, we can discuss. So, are there any problems, any questions, any doubts you have?
No doubts as of now.
Okay. So, I will let this one run. I'm not sure why it is taking so much of time, but let this run. No, 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 no. I don't want to close. No. Yeah, it is running, but it is running slowly. Not sure why. Let me just close my rest of the applications so that it gets some speed. Okay. Yeah, I could see things are running now. Starting is always slow. Don't know why. Usually, this is a problem I've faced with Jupyter notebooks. So usually the start is quite slow. When you import things, it is slow. But once it has done that, then it is faster. Great. So now we have this in place. So that's good. So, okay, okay. Then let's give it a start. Okay. So basically, until last day, what we have done is we have got our model, right? From a manual inspection, we can see that these are the predicted values. The first row is the predicted value. The second column is my actual value. Can I convert this into a data frame? Let's see if I can do that. Then I can show it like this. Yes, I can show it like this. So clearly, right? So I can take a head, let's say 20, head 20. And here I can see the first 20 rows where I could clearly see what is the difference, right? What is the difference between the predicted value. So even better, what I can do, I can round this to 2 places decimal, and I can also round, no, this is already rounded to 1 place decimal. So why not this? Okay. Okay, NumPy array does not have a method round. Okay, very good. No problem. Let me remove this. Fine. Okay. So I see there are cases where the prediction is really not very good, but there are cases which is quite good. So example given this one. Here the predicted value is 31.39 while the expected or actual value is 30.8, right? So this is on the testing data. So this is a very important concept that we can quickly revise, and then we can look at the ways to measure how the performance of the model is. How do we actually come to know how to measure the performance of the model? What is it that we exactly mean by the performance of a model, and so on? So we know that we have things like RMSC and so on, right? So that is, or those are things that we will anyways be looking into. But let me just take this opportunity to quickly discuss a very important factor called training and testing. And in the same way, we can also try and discuss what is the concepts of overfitting and underfitting. Okay. So if you have any doubts here, Rohi, I would strongly recommend that you should let me know then and there, because it's a very important thing and it's really a very important concept which will be applicable throughout the life cycle. Okay, so let's try to look at that. So what we are saying here is we have a data set which looks something like this, let's say, and it has, let's say, it has 200 rows. Okay, so the reason why we have divided it into a training and testing split of 70/30, we have a training phase which is this is the training phase, this is the 70 part, and this is the 30 part. So we have used the 70 part to do the training and 30 part to do the testing. Now what this really means is the model is going to fit itself. Okay, it is going to fit itself using the gradient descent method, right? So we have already discussed the method of gradient descent, where we have seen that on x-axis, if I take j of theta, or j, which is my cost function, and on y-axis, I take the parameters, which is theta 0 and theta 1, just for a simple linear regression use case, then my overall graph is going to look something like this, where I start from this point and I regress to some point, and I do a gradient to some point, then I gradient to some point, I gradient to another point, and so on. Maybe I reach over here. So I had to reach this minimum point, which is my global minima, which is the lowest point of error. Or in other words, I had to find the optimal values of theta 0 and theta 1, okay, where I get the lowest value of j. So I'm just trying to minimize the errors, and I'm trying to find that optimal set of values for my theta 0, theta 1 until theta n in case of multiple linear regression, where the error comes at the lowest. And this technique of using the derivatives, right? We are using the slopes and the derivatives here, is known as the gradient descent method. Okay, give me 1 minute. Give me one minute. Yeah, I'm back now. So yeah, so we our intention is to find the optimal values of the parameters, right? Theta 0, theta 1, out to theta n, where the error is the minimum. Now, while we do this, just a quick recap: this rate at which we are coming down, right? This is also given as alpha, which is known as the learning rate. So the rate at which we come down is also very important, because let's say I'll draw just one more diagram. Let's say I have a very high learning rate. Okay, I just want to do the calculations as quickly as possible. This is a Friday, let's say, and I would like to go home as soon as I can. So in that case, let's say I'm selecting a very big alpha, and that alpha will actually result into problems, because as you can see, I'm skipping a lot of places, and then I have to come back, and then I have to come back here, then again I have to go over here, and so on. So as I move from one point to another point in this J curve, I have to find whether I am going in the right direction or not. So am I going towards an error being decreasing or increasing? So if I go over here, it decreases. Then I go over here, it also decreases. Then I went over here, it also decreased. Then I went over here, but it increased. So I have to come back. But if I come back and my alpha is big, then I may be ending up over here and not on the global minimum. So overall, what we are seeing over here is we are facing a lot of problems, right? If we are having a very big kind of a alpha, or a learning rate is quite big. But uh, on contrary to that, let's say again I'll draw j and theta graph. So theta represents the parameters, let's say thetas, I'll say thetas, and this is j of thetas, right? So if my learning rate looks like this, or learning graph looks like this, and I have a very small alpha, okay, I have a very small value of alpha, then obviously it's going to take a lot of time for me to reach this global minima. Although that's a very good kind of a method, but then it'll take a lot of time. So computationally, it's going to be very expensive. So looking at this, we have to find some kind of way. And one of the common ways which is used in case of gradient descent, which can be coded as well, I'll have to check if sklearn is already implementing this while executing linear regression, which is known as batch gradient descent. So in case of batch gradient descent, uh, what we do is we take a batch. So rather than doing a stochastic gradient descent, which was our previous approach, where we are selecting an alpha and by that value of alpha we are going, and then we are running this entire thing on the entire set of data. So this decrease in the error is output of the fact that I have taken the entire training data set and I have looked for the error. Now, if I do it in a batch, so let's say I have 70% of data as training, which means I have 140 rows, right? 140 rows of data, which I can train. So in this case, what I do, rather than taking 140 rows, I'll just take 50 rows. Okay, or I'll just take, let's say, 70 rows. So I'll divide 140 into two parts, and I'll take batches of 70, and I can do random shuffling and sampling within those batches as well, and then I'll come down. So using that, I'm going to train my data, and then I'm going to find whether I'm going in the correct direction towards a minimum value or my error is increasing. And hence, I continue doing this and I continue doing this. In this case, this is kind of a good mixture of having a very optimal kind of an alpha, which we have to select. And then we can see how it goes. So usually what we do, if we are coding it manually, right, we select alpha of 0.1. Usually that is what we do, right? But then we will have to check that from the sklearn, let's say, documentation, how exactly sklearn is implementing it, right? But overall, the fundamental here is that I have a data which is now split into 70-30. So I have 70% of my data which is for training, 30% of my data which is for testing. I am training my model on this 70% of data, which means my linear regression fit or my model is fit on this data set, right? On this data, my model is fit. So my model is created in this data, and hence I'm getting an equation out of this data, right? I'm actually getting an equation out of this data, which is basically summation I equal to 1 to m, okay, bi xi, right? Where b is the weight, or I can also call this as theta I. Okay, so this is theta I xi. So theta are the parameters, right? Theta 0 is considered to be 1. Theta 0 is considered to be 1. This is my uh, the intercept, right? So theta 0 is considered as 1, and then the slopes are multiplied with each and every value. So this is the final formula for the multiple linear regression, which we have seen earlier as well. M is the number of training examples I have. So here 70% out of 200 rows of data, right? So M is equal to 140. So I've got this equation. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to fit this data, which is not seen by the model, into this equation, and then I'm going to find out the output which the model is giving me. So let's say the model is giving me y hat or y hash, right, or y bar, and I'm going to take this y hash or y hat is going to be a good representation, and I have the y over here as well. So in case of my testing data, I have x test and y test, right? I have x test and I have y test. So I know the actual output here, right? So I have the y. So this will not be y hat. Let me just remove this, and I'm going to call this y. So I have the actual values and I have the predicted values. I can simply compare them and try to find out my metrics, which is like mean squared error, right? Sum of squared error, and so on, right? Now, one of the most important things which we saw is the R square or the adjusted R square score. So that is what we are going to find out now. We will look into the sklearn documentation first, and we'll find out how we can calculate the MSE or RMSE, and then we are going to find out the library, and then we are going to execute it, right? So now that we have got R square, is that the only value? Is that the only way in which we can find out whether my model is good or not, right? The answer is no. There is something that we need to do, and that is entirely visual, and that is entirely up to the perspective of the data scientist who is doing this. So in other words, I need to do other things like residual analysis and so on, which we will look into at later stage. But the most easy and efficient method is, let's take all the points. Okay, let's take all the points, and let's take the points like this. These are my, let's say, the data points which are in the training set. Now I'm going to draw the fitted line. Okay, so this is my model, let's say. Okay, we are considering a very simple situation of a simple linear regression, so that it is easy for me to explain you things, or otherwise I'll have to draw in 3D, which will become complicated. So in this case, as simple as it sounds, this is my x, which is my independent variable, and y is my dependent variable. So let's say x is age and y is the salary, right? So we have fit a good model over here. Okay, let's say this model I'm going to call good because there are points which are far away from the predicted line, and there are points which are really well, it's a predicted. They are also falling on the line in some cases also, right? But let's say if we have a situation which is something like this. Okay, let's draw another situation. Okay, let's draw another situation where I'll just change the color. Give me 1 minute. Where we have case which is something like this. Okay, so I have a model which is fitting my data something like this. Do you call this a very good model? The answer is, if I show this to anyone who is not aware of the concept that I'm going to talk about right now, that person will say this is the best model in the world, right? Because if you see, there is not much difference between the actual points which are in pink and the predicted line, or the predicted points which we can draw as perpendicular lines on that line, on the best fit line, is almost the same, because there is not much of a difference, right? You see, the distance is so small that we can't even see it. It's almost on the line of the prediction. So the distance is very small. Hence my mean squared error or sum of squared errors or R square value will be very, very close to 1. Let's say in this case, R square value is close to 0.9, right? R square value can be in the range of, as I have already told you, it can be in the range of 0 to 1. The closer it is to 1, right? Usually we think that the better is the model. Okay, now you are going to challenge that kind of statement. And why we are doing so is because if we have a model which is something like this, then the situation is analogous to when we used to go to college or when we used to go to school. Usually in boards like CBSE or ICSE, I'm not actually blaming them, but even I was there in the CBSE board, and I know at that point in time when I was in school, it was quite easy to score 70 to 75% marks in any board exams. Why? Because in class 12 or in class 10th examinations, I can simply buy a guidebook which contains the last 10 years of question papers, and I can mark them up. The more my memory power is, the better my marks are. So if I have marked the entire book, or if I have practiced the last 10 years of question, irrespective of how good or how bad I am, irrespective of how much I have actually understood or not, I can go to the exam and I can get 75% marks. Why? Because there are many repeats in the exam. Although not the exact question is going to come as a repeat, but the structure will be the same. Right? So if I have practiced it, I'll remember the formula. And then in the exam, I'm just going to put the new values in the formula, I'll get the answer. So I get, let's say, 75% marks. Now imagine there is some other board, okay, some imaginary board, right, where where we have uh, some board examination or some class examination which is going on, something kind of like a pre-test, like, so before we go to the board exam, that school, that board is organizing a pre-test, and there are students who are appearing for that exam. At least one of the students, what he did is that he got some book which he knows is the favorite book of the teacher. He took that book and he read it up. So let's say this is that book, okay, and the student has already read up the entire book. The student has very good memory power. So this book is read, and this book, let's say, has 100 questions. 100 sample questions are there, right? 100 questions he has completely memorized, and now he goes to that examination. Okay, he goes to the examination, and the syllabus or the questions which is there in this examination is entirely, or maybe to a good extent, not matching with what he has read. So these 100 questions are now in vain, because in the question paper itself he has got, let's say, 20 questions only, out of which only 2 questions are out of these 100 questions which he has memorized. Okay, I did not say he has understood the concept or the formula or things. He has actually memorized things, right? He has learned them by heart. He has not found the pattern. He has not tried to understand the mathematics behind it, the context behind it. The student is here, let's say, The student has simply marked up the things. And then in the exam, there are only two common questions. So obviously, he will get marks 2 out of 20. And obviously, this is the failure marks, correct? So the student will fail. This is a very important concept when it comes to machine learning as well. This book that we are studying, or the 100 questions which is there in the book, are these points. These are the training set points. These are the questions which are there in my guidebook, which I'm trying to remember. If I try to remember, okay, then I'm doing very good when somebody gives me questions which are exactly matching out of these 100 questions, which means in the context of our linear regression, if I have a model which has, rather than understanding the pattern in the data, it has marked up the data, then it performs very, very well in case of the training set. So in that case, my R square or adjusted R square value, right, for the training set is excellent, right? It is really excellent. But if I go to now if I go to a new data set, okay, now if I go to a new data set, its performance is something like this, right? So what it is doing over here, or what is happening here, is that in the test set, this is where the exam has happened. Okay, in exam there were 20 questions, only 2 questions matched out of 100. So that's what is correctly predicted. Rest everything is incorrectly predicted. And we look at the distance. If you do perpendicular, this is a huge error, huge, right? But look at the performance in the test set, or in the training set. I'm sorry. So performance in the training set is exemplary. I gave you a book, you marked it up, then I asked you random 10 questions, you are able to answer everything because you have not understood any formula, you have not understood any physical context. You have simply marked them. And then I give you the real exam. And in the real exam, out of those 100 questions that you have marked, there is only one question or two questions that has come common, and you fail in that exam. So that's not what we want our model to do. We want our model to be something like this. We want our model to be something like this. In this model also, there are a lot of points which are very far away from the best fit line, which is okay for me. Why? Because my best fit line has to generalize, right? The person may or may not be getting very good marks in each and every exam. That's not my objective. My objective is the person should have understood the concepts to whatsoever extent he has understood the concept. I don't expect every student of mine to be like Albert Einstein and remember everything. Maybe even he did not remember everything because he once said that I don't need to know everything. I just need to know where to find it when I need it. Now, the point is, if I have a model which is generalizable like this, then I have far better ways to optimize it. And I have a relatable model, right? Because a model which does not perform any error is a questionable model. It is mathematically impossible that you have no errors. If you are making no errors in your model and you have an R square value which is extremely close to 1, you have done some mistake. The same mistake that the student has done. He has marked up the exam questions. Instead, he should have marked up the formulas. And that's exactly what my model has to do. I have to create a model which doesn't mark up the questions. It marks up the formulas. It should remember the formulas. It should understand how the patterns are to be calculated. It should understand where the patterns are, right? If we understand where the patterns are, then that will be good, right? Then that will be good because then we can generalize well, right? So in that case, we can fit ourselves into any situation, just like this line, right? This is a concept. So this situation over here, let me use another pen over here. This situation over here where the student has marked up everything, a very good score if I ask random questions from the book he has already read, is known as overfitting. Okay, and this situation where it is not, this is the result of that, right? So overfitting results into a poor model which is not generalizable. What do you mean by the other side of things? So there is one more side of this. I hope this one was clear. So let me clear the drawings. Give me 1 minute. So one more side of thing is, let's say I have a model which is something like this. I'm going to take some points. Right? It is somewhat close representation of an underfit model. Why it is an underfit model is because, let's say this is my training data on which the model is fit, and hardly a few points, okay, a few points are identified to the closest possible extent. It has generalized too much, right, to capture the variety of the data, right? To capture the entire variety of the data, it has generalized. And that's what the problem over here is. In case of an overfitted model, the problem was it was trying to capture all the variety. And here it is trying to generalize in terms of the variety. In other words, it is trying a lot to make my model more and more generalized, right? In the last few minutes also I said, right, I need a model which can be generalized. Now in that sense, in that effect, okay, this guy, this model here is trying to generalize so much, okay, that it is causing a problem which is known as bias. Why is this a problem called bias? Is because he is biased to a certain points and not to all of the points, right? That is one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is bias, this word technically or in the mathematical sense also coincides or is also similar to the word error. So in this case, I have a lot of error when it comes to training the data, or part of the training data. In other words, I can say in part of the training data, I have a lot of errors. My total error for this model, let's say it is something like this, something like this, and something like this. So the total error of this model is very high. So I can say this model is biased. But in case of an overfitted model, what can I say? Let's again draw the overfitted model. The overfitted model is going to look something like this. Let me quickly change the color. The overfitted model looks something like this, right? It is very, very close to all the points, and it has somewhat taken all the points. The overfitted model will not look like this, by the way. Okay, an actual overfitted model, okay, will look something like this. Let me just draw an actual overfitted model, or try to draw it. Okay, so an overfitted model will not be a linear model. It will be something like this. Let me just change my color. It is going to look something like this. It has captured the pattern so well that it is no longer a straight line, right? But a generalized model, what I expect to have will be something like this. A good model will be something like this. Okay, but maybe I have got a model in some case, okay, which is something like this, right? So I will call this green line. This green line I'm going to call this is an underfit model. Underfit model. This red line I'm going to call an overfit model. And this orange line here I'm going to call a good model or an expected model. So this is very good. Why? Because it generalizes. The red one tries to capture the variety of all the points and it gets too complicated, and it results into the same kind of a situation of that poor student of ours. 100 questions marked up, in the exam you got only 2 common questions, right? And the underfit model is just creating a line just to generalize it. Many of the points are not met. There is a lot of bias. Okay, so in case of an underfit model, we have a lot of bias. And in case of an overfit model, we have a lot of variance which is captured. This problem, okay, this problem is otherwise known as the fact that this overfit model, right, has a lot of variance, right? The overfit model is having a lot of variance and the underfit model is having a lot of bias. Then we need a good model or a better model which can find a balance between bias and variance. This is called bias variance trade-off. So how do we find something which is kind of a negotiation between an underfit model and an overfit model, which is otherwise my good model, which has a very good balance between the variance and bias, or capturing the variance and bias within the data. So this is exactly why we are doing test trend split right now. There are other ways to tackle this. We will be looking into other ways which may not be directly related to regression use case that we are working over here, but we can apply them. We have not learned them yet, and that's why we are not going to apply them right now. We will learn what are those techniques. I'll tell you the names if you want to quickly cross check on the internet after we are done for today. Then we can, or you can look for things like grid search, right? You can look for things like cross validation. So these are techniques that we are going to use to better sample my data and better create training and testing sets out of an existing or pre-existing training data. And then we will be able to minimize the effects of this overfitting and underfitting. Then we select a model which is going to be a fairly generalized model, and then we can go ahead with it, right? I hope the concept was clear. I'll take a quick 5 or let's say a 1 minute break is useful here. If you have any questions, please go ahead.
Yes. So, Umik, how will we know that this model is overfitted or this model is underfitted?
Yeah. So if you see, the answer here is that you have to find out. Okay, you have to find out what is your uh, line or how does your line look. Okay, in case of the training data. So that's exactly what we are going to do now. So we are going to take the training data, we are going to take the testing data. Okay, we are going to fit a model. We have already fit a model, right? We are just going to plot the model. Okay, we will plot the model and we will see how good or how the shape or size of the line looks like, right? So if I plot this, then I will come to know about the line, right? I'll come to know about my regression line. Now, if my regression line is too close, right? If my regression line is too close, then I have a problem. I have a problem, and that problem is as simple as the model is trying to overfit itself during the training phase itself. So in the training phase itself, my performance is not generalized, then how can I expect it in the testing phase, right? So that's what I am going to do. So as you can see over here, we have already tried to plot, but this is the plotting of y-test and y-pred. Okay, we have to try and create a plot which is going to do the same for the model that we have got. Okay, for the model that we have got using the testing data or using the training data, right? So that's what I'm trying to find out.
Okay. Okay. One more thing.
Yeah.
Out of the underfitting and overfitting, which one is more bad? Like, which has a more negative effect on our model?
Both
Underfitting or
have.
overfitting? Is there a parameter that like overfitting is less bad than underfitting or
No,
something like that?
no, no.
No
There is
generalization.
no such kind of a generalization, but usually both are bad because you have to consider the scenario like this. We took an example, right? And for the overfitted model, so overfit is where the student read and marked up all the 100 questions. Underfit is where the student thought, no, man, I mean, why should I study all the 100 questions? I know that maybe only these 10 questions are really very important, as the teacher told us during one of the classes which I attended. Maybe I have bunked the rest of the classes, but in one or two of the classes, my teacher told me these two concepts are really important. So what he did is that rather than reading 100 questions and trying to understand them, he only read that the set of, it's a 10 questions. So that is known as a underfitting, because underfitting is where you are not even considering all of your data points, right? You have so much of a disturbance in the model that it has got into bias. It's like in a class I have two students who are my favorites, right? And then I'm giving all my attention to those two students rather than the 38 other students. So that's called a problem of bias, which is wrong, right? Because even in this case, the student got biased, that in my exam, I know there is a very high probability, don't know what model he has fit in his case. And he has studied only those 10 questions and he has gone to the exam, right? Even in that case, the problem is there, because even in that case also, if there are 20 questions in the exam, right, not even a single question can come from those 10 questions. Or maybe he has got only one question out of those 10. Maybe he has got only 3 questions out of those 10. Even in that case, he will fail, right? Because his marks will be 3 by 20. If he studies everything, he will fail. If he does not study everything, he will fail. So he does not have to take this in a very emotional kind of a way. He has to logically think about it. He has to logically think about the pattern which was there in the examination. He has to logically think about what all subjects I have to study, what is the context behind, and how do I deal with that, or how do I actually understand that rather than memorizing it. Right? So in this example, you can see both cases are wrong. Yes, you are right. There is no direct, let's say, straightforward metric that you can simply call, and you cannot say that okay, this is the case where overfitting is bad rather than the underfitting case. But no, I mean we may not have that kind of an example, or we may not have that kind of uh, a metric to prove that to you. But it is quite clear. I mean, for to both the cases, it is a problem.
Okay. Okay, and just one more thing. Like for building a model, we consider around 80% data as testing and 20% as training. So, assuming we are training our data and the model turns out to be overfitted. So, this 80% data is generally randomized.
Mhm.
So, our 80% data kinds of overfits the model.
Mhm.
And let's suppose the other 20% is not very much fitted in, and they turns out to be outliers in the data.
Okay.
uh, yeah, so I think this should be this can be for everything.
Yeah.
Like the model need not to be overfitted, because suppose the data contains some global outliers and some outliers, so the we will get unexpected outputs for everything,
Mhm.
for all the models.
Yeah.
uh, and yeah, so my question is how we will know that it is overfitted or not,
Yeah.
because
So
outliers are everywhere.
see, I mean, outliers will be there. So there are two parts of the question. Let me take it into two different ways. So part one of the question is, what do I do if I have outliers? Now you have a very simple method of doing the scaling of the data. We have not done any scaling in our case. We will do. So that is also a plan of action. We will scale our data and retrain the model, right? As you see, we have already written it there. We will be scaling the data. We can scale the features and then we can see. So if you scale the features, if you remember the scaling techniques that we have looked into, it converts any data set. Let's say I'm doing a standard scaling, which is using z-score, right? So using z-score, if I'm doing a standard scaling, all my values are now going to fall in the range of 0 to 1. So outliers are no longer a problem for me, right? But should I do that or should I remove the outliers is a question which I have to answer. Okay, let's say as a data scientist, if I'm looking at a problem statement, okay, where I have data of my employees, and obviously there will be certain employees who have either come from very good institutions like IIT and so on, from where we do not belong, right? At least I do not belong. So my average salary, or people like me will have an average salary which is obviously lesser than the person who has joined us from IIT, because he is from India's best institutions, right? So he will be expected to have more salary. Now let's say you are creating a data analysis project, or you are working on some kind of modeling. Are you going to deliberately treat them as outliers and keep them away? The answer is no. Maybe some of their properties are actually going to help you do that, or help you arrive to a better model. So in that case, you can't really say, okay, I'll find the outliers and then I'll simply drop them. No, that's not really a good approach in that case. But it depends. It depends on the question. It depends on the use case, is whether or not you are going to get rid of the outliers. Now, here you have two outcomes. You either get rid of the outliers or you don't. If you have gotten rid of the outliers, then you have solved your problem. If you have not gotten rid of the outliers, you have to scale your data, right? Then you can minimize the effect of outliers. Now, once you have treated the outliers, let's now come to the other question which you have. I have 80% data which is used for training, 20% data which is used for testing. Even in that case also, even if you don't have outliers, right, please don't be under this impression that outliers are the only reason of causing data variance or bias in the data, right? There can be cases where you are actually getting problems in the data because of wrong sampling, right? You don't know behind the box what kind of sample you have picked up. Maybe that sample itself was wrong. You may have to do random sampling. You may have to do a lot of other techniques of doing sampling. and then you have to train your model, right? So if you're not getting a representative sample out of your data, maybe your data engineering is wrong. So you can go back to the basics. So these are kind of problems that we can somehow try to tackle in the real world using techniques like grid search, right? So these are techniques which we are going to learn and then we are going to apply, which applies to all the kind of, let's say, machine learning problems. It is not related to one specific regression or classification kind of a problem. These are like a generic set of problems. These are problems with the data. So garbage in is equal to garbage out, right? You cannot do science without data, right? You are doing data science because you have the data and then you're trying to apply some science. So if your data is nonsense, then your science is also going to give you nonsense output. So you have to do something with the data so that you can massage this properly, and then it gives you the required model, which is better. Now, the third part of the question is, how are we going to understand whether the model is good or not? We look at the numbers, we look at the R square value, right? We look at how it has really performed on the data, right? Or maybe even good, we extend our model to do A/B testing. A/B testing is a concept we have not really looked into. A/B testing is a concept where, let's say, I have created this model and I found out what is the formula to calculate the house rent. So what is going to be the formula? Let's try to find out. So I have my model, which is lm underscore one, right? So lm underscore one dot coefficients. Okay, if I do this, these are my coefficients of the model. How do you relate these coefficients? You can relate these coefficients with the feature names. All right. So what you can do a list, and you can do a zip, and then you can say feature columns, comma, end, and then you can do this, and then I get this. Okay, and then I do a pd dot data frame, and I go at the end, and then I can do this. So these are the coefficients. These are the thetas. Okay, these are the thetas, right? This is theta 0, theta 1, and so on. So theta 0 is my slope. It is not the coefficient. So what is my intercept? So I can find that as intercept is this, right? So this is my theta 0, right? Theta 0 is this. So first of all, the validity of the model is quite important. Theta 0 is 37. It means irrespective of all the factors being 0, right? Irrespective of, even if everything is considered to be null and void, I still have a price of house which is 37. Okay, this is the median price of house, 37 in thousands of dollars. So $37,000 will be the price of the house, even if I don't consider any of these factors like Freeman, ZN, and Indus, and so on. Right now, the question is that really realistic? How do you find that out? You do some kind of A/B testing. You give some offers, right? You give some offers to the customers, or in your website where you are selling the houses, you can ask them to look for the houses and quote a price. Okay, you are going to quote a price and they are going to vote whether they like the price or not. Or maybe you can do it in a different way also. You can give them the offer. You can give 20 people the offer. Let's say you have prospective 100 customers who are willing to buy the property. They have liked your ad, and out of them you have divided them into 50 group of 50 and group of 50 more. In group A, you give them an offer of 37,000, and in group B, right, you give them an offer which is more. Now you consider all the other factors and give them some offer. See how many people are taking this and that. Explain them what is the benefit or the kind of things that have analyzed before you have given them the offer, and see which one is most important. So are users interested only to look at the amount that you are quoting them, or they are also interested to know the reason behind why you are quoting that amount, right? Because I personally know people who will only look at the amount. If they get a good flat at a good rate, they may not really consider how far the school is because they own a car, right? So there is a probability you will get that kind of customers as well, right? But there will be other customers like me who will first of all see how close is the vegetable market, right? So this kind of a testing you can do with sample set of 100 users, and you'll come to know what is your model's response in the real world. So that's one way to validate your model. The other way, there is no simple way, I'm sorry to say this, you have to put your model in use, and then you come to know over experience, right? 90% of the cases, this is what people do. Most people don't have the resources to conduct A/B testing. Okay, to conduct A/B testing, you have to find those 100 users. You have to do something to provide them with the facility so that they can vote, and you have to talk to 100 users and so on. Right? So anytime the company may not have the resource to do it. Right? But if you have the resource, you will do maybe 10% of the time you are going to do. Rest 90%, you create a model which may or may not be very good, and then you put it onto production, and then you see how it works. So example, this is my list of features with their I'll not say importance, coefficients, right? And let me just do one thing. So firstly, let's find the coefficient intercept in the R square, adjusted R square score of the model. Okay, so we have found this, we have found the intercept. Let me just comment this over here, the intercept, and now we are going to find the R square score. Okay, so how do we do that? lm_1 dot score, right? We just have to find this. It is a method, so I have to give it inside brackets, and then it is expecting two arguments, x and y. So what arguments am I going to pass in there? I'm going to pass what I am trying to compare. Am I trying to compare the training data, or am I going to compare the testing data? Right? Obviously, if I give x train and y train, this is going to be my training data of my model created on top of the training data, right? Which gives me an R square score of 0.74, right? What if I try to find this on, no, sorry. This is not right. This is not right. There is one more way actually to do this. So let's forget this. I'll try to find this out and then I will tell you. So finding the R square score for the test data or the model itself. So how do I do that? Is that I'm going to do lm_1 and then score. Inside score, I'm going to pass this y test and y pred. Yes, x test. I believe I have to pass this. No, x. Just a moment. Let me just do some googling. I believe I have forgotten. sklearn linear regression find R2 score. Metrics R2 score. Okay, this is also a good library. From metrics we can get that y true and y pred. Yes, this is what I was doing, right? So let me just import the library. So from sklearn.metrics import R2 score, right? And now calculate the R2 score for the model. So what does the documentation say? Y true versus y pred, right? So R2 score, this will be a R2 score y test, y pred, right? So this is the accuracy of my model when it worked on the predictions. It has a good R square score. I'm not saying that it is bad, right? It has a good R square score. But does this signify that my model is overfit or underfit? Right? This is what the question is. So this can be answered in a very simple way. So you can try to imagine, which is something like this. Let's say you represent this number in form of a line, okay, which is line like this, and you try to logically divide this line into extremes on both of the sides. So if you have any R square value which is falling within a general range, let's say 0.4 or 0.3, to 0.7. Even 0.3 is quite less. I will say 0.4. If you have over a period of time, over experience, you will find this 0.4 to 0.7. This is good. Okay, this is a good range. But if it is something in this range, right, 0 to 0.1, this is very bad. 0 to 0.3, 0.1 to 0.3 maybe. And anything more than 0.7, you will be skeptical. So let's say 0.8 or something. Why is this so? Obviously, we want a model which has good R2 score, right? We are always looking for models which are good in terms of R2. So why are we looking for a model which has somewhat general kind of an R2 score? Or maybe we are going to look for a model which is going to be something like this. I'll try to settle down with a model where I have the R2 score in the range of, let's say, 0.5 to 0.7. If that's the case, then I have a generalized model. This is what I can say. Usually, you can do some research on this and you will be able to find usually people will go with this kind of model only. Right? Even we go. Now, this answers the third question for you. How do I know that even after outlier treatment, even after fitting a model, how do I know whether or not there is uh, a problem with underfitting or overfitting or not? You always look at the metrics. If you look at the metrics, you will come to know, oh, it is clearly out of logic. So there is really not much of math that you can do, although there is math. Okay, you can do math and try to figure out how valid it is. But unfortunately, in case of regression, because you're doing an estimation, right, that math is very generalized. So in the sense, you have to apply some kind of, let's say, methodology which you have developed yourself or which you have been stringent on, and then you come to know how to look for this kind of underfit and overfit, or there are other ways as well. So let's say linear regression, underfit or overfit, right? So if you look at this, overfitting and underfitting, a complete example. So this is where I believe this website might have some problems. So let's see. So this is a good website. Let me just share this with you. This is really good. Yeah, towards data science is a good website. So I'll just paste this link over to you. Maybe you can try to read this, right? And this is a very good example. They are taking some other points over here. So this is what their regression line looks like. Okay, this is what their regression line looks like. I mean, overall, there is a problem here. If you see how they have plotted the data, right? How they have plotted the data keeps on coming close, right? So if you have a function which is really complicated like this and it is trying to fit the data, then you can say there is an overfit and underfit, right? So that's how you come to know about it. So the easiest way, as you can see over here, they have tried to plot it. And there are other ways as well. This is not the only way, okay? So there is one thing which is known as goodness of fit, okay, sklearn, I'm going to say. And then here no, this is model.fit. This is fine. I think this might have some answers here. Yeah. Okay. So he just found another link where he has set up some random data and he is doing a fit. Okay, and then he's trying to output the model. So look at his model here. Are you going to call this an overfit model or an underfit model? It is somewhat overfit. It is not a complete overfit, because ideally, if the model would have been something like this, okay, then I would call it a completely overfit model, right? So this is what you can do. The best way to do it is to visualize the data. If you visualize the data, you will come to know how good the fit is, or this is also known as the goodness of fit. So there are numbers which gives you the goodness of fit, right? And there, here you can see what is the problem over here. So he is creating the data points, right? And now you see the line is trying to exactly match with the points, and hence you have a problem, right? So this is how you will come to know over a period of time how bias and variance really looks like, right? And how it is going to affect you. Yeah. So I'm just trying to find one more thing. Let me find this. So sklearn linear regression, how to get training data R2 score. Okay, I think no, I'm not able to find them. Maybe there's something wrong that I'm doing while doing the search, right? I think I'm doing something wrong over here, so that's why I'm not able to find this. Right, but there is one thing which is mentioned in this page, which is really good, which I just wanted to quickly tell you, is trying to predict stocks, which I don't want to do because I don't want to get distracted with, let's say, money. But in this case, what he's trying to do, he simply, yeah, he is simply doing some processing, and then he's fitting the model, and then he is getting the RMS or the root mean square. Okay, the root mean square error he is getting from here. So one of the techniques that we use is that we plot multiple models, and then we see if we have a changing root mean square or not. So what I mean by that is, let's say I have a model M1 with a root mean square of 100. Okay, so RMS is 100, and then I have created another model M2. Okay, where I get a root mean square of 120, just like he has got. Okay, so in this case, I'll call M2 as a bad model because it has not performed as good as M1. The RMSE increasing, okay, RMSE is increasing, okay, means the R square score is decreasing. So R square has decreased from M1 to M2. And why is this the case? Because the root mean squared error, the root mean squared error has increased, right? So that's one more way. See, unfortunately, there is no clear-cut way. There is no function which you can run, and that function is not going to tell you, okay, this is the problem. You go ahead and fix this, then you will be able to solve the problem, right? The problem with the overfitting or the underfitting of the model, right? There is no such function. So we just have to take care of this. We just have to go ahead with what we find and how we are going to interpret the model, and then only we will be able to uh, find this out, or we will be able to determine how good or how bad our model is. Did that answer your question? Yes, no?
Yeah, yeah. I have one or more two conceptual questions also.
Yeah, go ahead. Maybe we just have 2 minutes of time. We can keep a pause over here, and you can go ahead.
Yeah, so like in statistics, we have learned that when we say that we are sure, we are 95% sure,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
So in terms of machine learning, when we say we have built a model, we meant that our accuracy will be limited to 70% only. And in case if it is if we are getting output accurate output greater than 70%, we will term the model as overfit.
No, not always. Not always. See, why I said this. So first of all, let me clear this confusion of 95%. Okay. So when we were studying statistics, and when we are doing statistical inference or hypothesis testing, how did we get this 95%? Because this is my confidence interval. Okay. Confidence interval is equal to 0.95 because my alpha value in that case is 0.05, right? So my confidence interval that I'm taking is 0.95 because I've assumed I have the capability to apply the central limit theorem. And in the central limit theorem, if I apply, I know that mean plus minus 2 standard deviation captures 95% of my data. That's why, unless otherwise specified, I will take my confidence interval is equal to 95%, right? Now, when we are doing, let's say, machine learning, this is assumed, okay, that whatever our hypothesis returns as, okay, is going to have a confidence of 95%, right? So example here, if let's say RM, okay, a number of rooms in the dwelling. So my hypothesis, alternate hypothesis is RM, okay, has no relationship with MEDV, okay, with the median price of the house. Okay, then my alternate hypothesis is I have a linear relationship. Okay, I have a linear relationship, okay, between RM and MEDV, right? This is what, as a statistician, I'm here to prove, and that's why I'm using a linear regression model, right? Now, this is what the content of the 95% thing is. Now, even if it is not really specified in case of, let's say, machine learning, the principles of hypothesis testing are not directly impacting, but alternatively impacting. So you have a different kind of hypothesis or understanding that you're trying to prove. But it is good to keep this in mind. Now, question number 2 is, I have got a model which has a 75% accuracy. Okay, and I have got a model which has a 95% accuracy. Okay, so how do I explain these models, or how do I conclude on these models? I can say that Rohi has created model M1, which he is 95% sure is 75% accurate, right? Maybe I have created model number 2. So Suddhasattva is 95% confident that his model M2 is 95% accurate, right? So the hypothesis is otherwise rejected or accepted. Now, just because you have implemented a model which you have got 75 and my model has 95, my model is an overfit and yours is a better one, that's not the case. Okay, that's not the case. The case is, if let's say we both have created 3 or 4 iterations. In the first iteration, your model performed 75%, my model has performed 95%. Then you can say my model is an overfit issue, or my model has got only 45%. Okay, then my model has an underfit issue. Why? Because in the first iteration, usually you can see in our notebook as well, right? In our notebook, we have not done anything. Have we scaled the data? No. Have we looked at the outliers? No. We have simply found that there are outliers in the data. We ran that describe thing. We ran the command on the data frame. We came to know there are outliers, but have we done anything to identify which are the outliers? No. Have we treated them? No. Have we scaled the data? No. So out of the box, I've simply understood the data. I've done a lot of EDA. I took the data, put it into model. That is called initial iteration, or let's say iteration 1. First try. First try. That's why I'm calling my model as LM underscore 1. So in case of LM underscore 1, your model, let's say, returns with 75% accuracy. My model returns with 95% accuracy. Clearly, there is some problem with the model. This is an overfitting issue. It's an indication there is an overfitting issue. You have no empirical proof, right? As I said, you have no function which you can run and that function says yes, then your model is overfit, right? But in the first trial, without doing any munging of the data, without doing any feature selection and so on and so forth, in this case, we didn't even select those top features, right? We did RFE to find the top features also. We did VIF to find the top features also. We did not use them, right? I've created a model with all the features. All the features I've used. I have not even processed the data. Even in that case, if I'm getting 45% accuracy in my model, that is a clear-cut indication. It is not a confirmation. It is an indication of an underfit model. Now we do iteration number 2. You scale your data, I scale my data. We do iteration number 3. We do grid search, CV, and all these things, and all the kind of techniques that we can apply to better our model, which we are going to look at, right? Then your model accuracy increases to 78. Then your model increases to accuracy 81. Now my model here got into 91% and my model got into 90% over here. Now you can say that even after 3 iterations, if my model is giving me 90%, after all the processes that I have applied, after RFE, after VIF, after feature scaling, then this model M2 is actually better than the model M1, because you are not able to increase the accuracy of your model. However, accuracy is not the only score. In case of, let's say, regression, we don't have any accuracy score at all. You cannot say your model is 81% good. You can only gauge the value of R2 score. R2 score is just an approximation. The more closer it is to 1, the better your model is. That's all you can say, right? This example or these numbers may be suitable for classification problems where we can clearly say what is the accuracy in percentage of that model, right? In terms of a percentage which falls between 0 to 100. Here I have an adjusted R square score which falls between 0 to 1, which is merely an indication. So in case of linear regression, anyways, you are handicapped. But that's a good indication that after doing a lot of things, a lot of exercises with the data, if you are getting 90% accuracy, then I can say that your model is good. Right? I can say that your model is good. But accuracy, as we will learn later, or R square score, as we will learn later on as well, is not the only indication of a good model. Did that clear your doubt?
Yeah, so it basically means that after applying these overfitting techniques, which we will see later, even if after that our percentage comes out to be greater than 90, it will not be termed as overfitted. It will be
Correct.
termed as accurate.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Also, if we have not applied these techniques and we have made a model which is let's say giving around 85% accuracy and all, so it will be treated as overfitted. But uh, how will we determine that it is bad or not until unless it is giving us the accurate output? Let's say about on the testing set, on the on the testing set it is giving us a great output, uh, and on the training side it gives us it was built on with that model, so it was giving very good on that. The line was very much closer, and even on the testing data it is giving us a very good accuracy, so without applying any other techniques. So will this be termed as overfitted, and will this be treated as a bad thing or a good thing?
This can be treated as a bad thing. I mean, I'm not saying that it will be treated as a good thing, but that actually depends on the context that you are looking at also. So your business problem is also going to determine that. But one thing that you have said correctly is that if you apply that model, let's say you have created iteration 1, you got a model which is 75% accurate. You think this is okay. Without any data processing, I'm actually getting a model. Put this into use. Okay, use this to predict the prices. See if that is going on well. Use this to predict the prices of houses for the users. Are they really liking the prediction or no? If that prediction is matching most of the times with output and the rating of your website is increasing, okay, where you are providing this prediction as a service, yes, then maybe your model does not need any tuning, but that is hardly the case. Because in reality, what happens is you put this model with 75% accuracy in production, you will get a rating from customers like 3.4 or 3.5 out of 5. So you have 3.4 stars out of 5. Now you want to improve this. To improve this, your the prediction has to be better. But the prediction has to be better, your accuracy has to improve. So you do iterations by iterations and you improve the model, right? So if you have done only one model, okay, or if you have done only initial set of the model, let's not talk about accuracy or overfitting at that point in time. After we have done a lot of models, right, then you can come to a conclusion whether you have built a very good model or not. So it's not always that in one go only you will get the best model. That's not the case. Again, after you have done these techniques, right, the accuracy can come down. It is not always the case that because you are doing iteration 2, iteration 3, data cleaning, outlier cleaning, and so on, that the accuracy will increase. Actually, it might also decrease, which is not a bad news, which is not really a bad news. Why? Because your model has to be generalized.
It will be more stable over a long
Exactly.
period of time.
Right. It will be stable in the sense that, again, that example of the student who mug up 100 questions. Rather than mugging up 100 questions, if he has remembered the formula for 30 questions, I'll consider him a better student.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah, got it.
Yeah. Okay, I think let's call it a day for then. We will continue tomorrow. I'll be sharing the materials. Thank you, Rohit.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night.